Yeah, well, let's dig in. Hello, everybody. I'm David Cooks, and I tell you what, paralysis can take on many, many forms. It can be physical like mine, or it can be psychological.
You can do anything you put your mind to. What seems impossible can be done by you.
And what we try to do is feature stories that go from difficult places to fulfilling purpose.
It may knock you down, but don't let it stop you. Got so much to give, a lot of life to live. You must go from paralysis to purpose.
You're in for a treat today.
Yeah, paralysis to purpose. Oh, paralysis to purpose.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Paralysis to Purpose, the podcast. I'm your host, David Cooks, and as always, let me thank you for liking, sharing, and leave us a review. A 5-star review at that would be great. I say it every time I talk to you. I love doing this because I get to speak with some of the most intriguing and inspiring people on the planet. And today is no exception. Ryan Estis just wrote a book with his brother, Chad. And the name of the book is called Prepare for Impact: Driving Growth and Serving Others Through Principles of Human-Centered Leadership. That's not all he does. He's a speaker. He runs a company called Impact 11. He's a thought leader and a keynote speaker on sales and leadership. I would venture to say a lot of the things he probably speaks about goes beyond sales and leadership to life. I'm excited to have this opportunity to talk with him today. Before we get started, what I want to do is just read a small paragraph from his book that will set the atmosphere for the podcast today. So let me grab the book and read this. It says, "That's the opportunity and responsibility of leadership today. We want our people to be healthy, find purpose, feel a sense of belonging, and take control of their lives and careers. We just can't expect them to do it the way they did or on our terms anymore. Like many leaders today, when we started our careers, we oriented our lives around our work. That's shifting as generations behind ours reorient their relationships to work around their lives. They want control of their time." I was thinking as I was getting ready for our conversation today, we're really going to talk about working in the post-COVID environment and what that really means. One of the things that, as a speaker, I experienced as well as you did, Ryan, was when COVID hit, all of a sudden, the speaking world was flipped upside down, like literally overnight. What do you do? Where do you go? It was crazy. And I also remember I had gotten sick during that time. And after becoming well enough to speak again, COVID hit. And then I had some other things happen. And the one thing that I missed the most was the human touch, the personal touch, the interaction. And that's probably what we're going to talk a lot about today as Ryan takes us down the path of some of the keys to his success and what he does now with people. So I don't even think I welcomed you to the podcast.
Thank you for reading the excerpt. And it's just a beautiful gift to hear somebody be inspired and read words that you had thought about and written. So it's great to be here, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Let's talk about the workplace. I guess before we do that, why don't you just give a little bit of your background for our listeners?
Sure. Well, I grew up in Cleveland. My parents were school teachers, ended up graduating from college and didn't have a lot of clarity or direction around what I wanted to do. And I was fortunate to the stars aligned. I ended up accepting a sales job, not really knowing much about sales, but I thought it was something I could do. And the first year was tough, but I got on the right track. Eventually started to have some real success. I became passionate, one of the best salespeople in our company. And in 2 or 3 years, I was on the right track. And I ended up running sales for that organization. Was with the company for 15 years. And it's interesting that you were talking about COVID and how it changed things. And I do think when crisis hits, how we respond really, because there's always opportunity in adversity and challenge. And if you remember back 2008, 2009, it was the Great Recession. It was a real financial collapse. It was terrifying for a lot of people. People lost jobs. There was panic and uncertainty in the world. And I was working for a big company. We were going through it. And I just decided it was time for me. It was time to make my exit. And so I ventured out in January of 2009. Everybody told me not to do it. It was the worst time in the history of the world to quit a job and start a business, especially being a first-time entrepreneur. And nobody was going to be hiring speakers, and that consultants were looking for real jobs. And but I bucked the trend. I just believed that there was something about starting at the bottom with very low to no expectations, figuring things out, learning as I go, iterating forward. And then if I wasn't going to do it then, I would never do it. And so I did. And the first 2 years, like any new assignment, are difficult. Any new business are difficult. But I never looked back. And then again, COVID was another one of those defining moments, as you alluded to. But for me, having gone through that once, it was also the opportunity to look around and said, okay, this is that moment again. What are you going to do? And for me, it meant writing a book and starting a business and doing a whole bunch of other things. I looked at the opportunity and the challenge. And I'm in a much different place now as a result of the decisions I made during that difficult moment in time. So 15, 16 years as a corporate B2B sales rep and then an officer in that company. I was our chief revenue officer. And then 15 years as a professional speaker and a consultant, and now again running a new company. So it's been a lot of fun.
One of the things that was so interesting in your book was the importance of investing in yourself.
One of the stories in the book, how I got sorted out in that initial job. I was about 10 months into that job. I was going to get fired. I was, because I had not made a sale. And it wasn't because I lacked drive or desire. I wanted to be successful. I wasn't getting development or support. And I didn't understand that professional selling, it's a skill. It's a set of competencies. I was fortunate. I ended up literally by happenstance or coincidence, or actually maybe not. Maybe I was supposed to cross paths with Jim Rohn, but I ended up being invited to a seminar. I didn't know who Jim Rohn was. I was in his audience, and 3 hours with him, and I that was the light bulb went off. And he said it. He said, don't wish it was easier, wish you were better. Don't wish for fewer problems, wish for more skills. The most important investment you can make is an investment in you. When the world changes, your opportunity is to change. That was it. I decided in that moment I was going to change. He recommended books. I read the books. I bought his books on tape. I wore those tapes out. When I was done with his tapes, I bought new tapes. My learning journey's never stopped. I'm going to date myself a little bit. They had the audio cassettes. When the CDs and DVDs started to become a thing, I was buying this luxury car, and I didn't think about it. There was a CD player and I had spent tens of thousands of dollars on. I had a whole library of books on tape, these cassette. And so I actually made him reinstall a cassette player in the luxury car. But he thought I was crazy. I said, no, man, you don't understand like how much money I've spent on my library. This is where I train every day on my commute. And he said, man, you're the only guy in the history of the world who wants us to find and reinstall. Because I said, yeah, that's like a real thing. Leaders are learners. And I think that's especially true now in the world, whether you in sales, leadership, or even in life. Things are changing quickly, right? You look at technology, category disruption, uncertainty in the geopolitical climate. We're moving at warp speed, and it's never going to be this slow again. Change isn't going to change. It's only going to get faster. So being a student and learning, it's just always been foundation to my success. And whenever I hit a plateau or I get off track, it's something I can look at and say, did I relax on my commitment to growth? Did I get complacent? Am I learning? And that's just how I think about it.
Hey, how do you maintain your discipline? Because all of that you just said to me, the big word that was flashing in my mind was discipline. How do you maintain that level of hunger and thirst to be this lifelong learner and also to be willing to change how you do it?
I really believe leadership is a responsibility. It's an act of service. And frankly, in many ways, so is writing and speaking, having something to prove. And I want to live the rest of my life in service and have something meaningful to give, to impact others. And that's a big reason to write a book, like Prepare for Impact. And I think in order to do that, you have to take the responsibility seriously. And so I do. And I'm a human being like everybody else. I didn't want to get up and go work out with a trainer at 6:30 this morning. I didn't. The alarm went off. I thought, oh man, it's nice to be in the bed and it's all warm and it's pitch black outside. So I create systems of accountability. The fact that that workout was in my calendar, that I'd already prepaid for it, that somebody was waiting for me. And I think when people are counting on you or you make commitments, if you take your responsibility to others and others' time and respect them seriously, it actually makes you more disciplined. And then it just becomes a habit. Discipline becomes a habit, right? It's like the idea of you're working out 4 or 5 times a week. It's just what I do. It's just part of my schedule. And you can apply that to other things. You can apply it to reading, learning, being a student, building businesses, the time you spend with your team, one-on-ones, whatever the priorities are. And that's some of the how I stay disciplined. I call it systems of accountability.
That's really good. Let's talk about your brother, Chad, just for a minute.
Sure.
He co-wrote this book with you.
He did.
His story, his journey is amazing too. And talk about the importance of having someone to mentor you, to coach you, to pour into you, that you ended up having a family member that really was able to assist you and who set an example for you. And he wasn't a perfect example, but he was the best example for you.
Look, I think that's something that Chad and I have done for each other throughout our entire careers. It's this symbiotic relationship. I have a ton of respect for Chad. And part of the reason why I wanted to write the book with him is because he really embodies the principles of a human-centered leader in the context of a very well-known large organization. Just for your listeners, Chad runs the business of the Dallas Cowboys. And the genesis of the book really goes back to the beginning of our professional relationship. And what's interesting about Chad and I is we've never worked together, but we've dual tracked our careers. We both started as sales people. We moved up into early management. Then we moved up into executive positions. I went off and started a business. He went and took a big job with the Jones family to lead the Cowboys. And so we've been on these dual tracks and supporting each other, challenging each other, coaching each other. If something went wrong with me, he'd be the first call I made. If he had a big decision, I'd be the first call he made. And to have somebody like that on the journey that you trust, you respect, who knows no matter what, he's got my best interests in mind and I've got his. The other thing you mentioned about discipline, there is, as the book illustrates, probably to some degree a healthy sibling rivalry. We're both pretty competitive, and those are some of the fun parts and the stories of the book. And for a business book, I do think the relationship thread does make it unique and different. But I know Chad's out there grinding every day, and I know he's hustling, and that's my brother. And I'm not going to sit on the sidelines and watch my little brother go out and create greatness in the world and have a big career. We push each other in that way. There's a little bit of this, hey, if he can, I can energy. And that's gone back and forth, and I think served us both very well.
It really has. Now, Chad, if you listen to this, I'm from Wisconsin. I'm a Green Bay Packer guy.
That'll hurt him.
But hey, if you're looking for to come and inspire your people, I'll come down and talk to you.
There you go. There you go.
The idea of human-centered leadership. What do you mean by that? And is that redundant?
I don't think it's redundant, particularly today, because I think there's a misnomer today that it's the strategy or the bottom line or the technology. And I think the essence of being truly a human-centered leader, it's like anything else, the devil's in the details, right? Every executive in the world is going to say, well, people are our priority, but it doesn't always hold weight when it comes to making difficult decisions or even in how you prioritize time. And if I'm ever doing executive coaching and an executive says, my people first, the next words out of my mouth are, can I have your phone? Which is, for some people, that can be a little, why do you want my phone? to look at your schedule because you just said your people are your priority. So I want to see how you're blocking your time to map it to what you just said was your number one priority. And see, that's where things fall apart. It's not the saying something, it's the doing. And for us, and you look at the definition of the book, it really is, yes, it's prioritizing people, but more specifically than that, it's putting people's experiences, their ideas, their expression, their contribution really at the center of everything you do. It's about designing better human experiences. And no surprise, human-centered organizations outpace traditional organizations. They outperform the S&P. They generate higher revenue. They get ideas to market 2 times faster. And it's to me, it's the right way to run a business in the post-pandemic world. And I think we're seeing that play out real time in terms of productivity and disengagement and relationships people have with their manager. And part of this idea is that soft skills are becoming the hard skills. In a technology-enabled world, what's going to be increasingly more valuable and more necessary to win in business is being astute at managing the most complex part of the business, which is people. And that's true if you're a commercial team, you're a sales organization. It's not about you, it's about the customer. And their success needs to be your success, and you co-create that together. And if you're a leader or a manager, it's about helping other people become the best they're capable of being. And that requires a significant investment each and every day in sharing a vision, creating alignment, and tapping into the dormant potential that exists in people, and making people feel safe and earning their trust, and putting people in a position to contribute their best. And I think we're at a moment where we're recognizing that if we don't get a whole lot better at that, it's going to impede ultimately the results of the enterprise.
I often tell people that you manage your money and you lead your people. And I think sometimes we try to manage people, and I think that's very difficult, but people want to be led. I spent a number of years coaching basketball and was fortunate enough to spend a couple of years at Duke University in the early 90s with Coach K and with the championship teams with Christian Laettner and Bobby Hurley.
Yeah.
These guys. And one of the things that struck me most, people would often ask me, what makes Coach K so special? And I said, it's not his X's and O's, and he's obviously brilliant at that. But it was his ability to have an individual relationship with each player that was so deep that he was able to push the button for each individual player, knowing what would make them tick. And I would marvel at that soft skill you talked about. I would sit there and he would literally be so involved in the members of that team, and he would know how to get them to go higher and further. And one of the things that you talked about in your book was when your employees or the people that you're leading know that you really care about them, it will increase their productivity. It increases loyalty. Everything about that relationship and about the bottom line increases. Can you talk about how you came to understand that one of the keys you talk about in the book is meeting people where they are and why that is so important?
I would say that there's a body of evidence of research that supports that thesis, but more important than that, it's my own experience. We'll do this exercise sometimes in our workshops called Best Boss, Worst Boss. Depends on the context of the workshop, but it's about what have you learned from the experiences you had that shaped you? And over doing that for years, time and time again, people would talk about their best boss, and they would describe how that person, how he or she made me feel. And people have this innate desire, this deeply held desire to be seen, to be heard, to be understood, and to be valued, yes, for their contribution, but also for innately who they are. And the very best leaders have a way of creating that kind of relationship. We call them high value, high trust relationships. And we talk about psychological safety in the book, that people feel safe and they're empowered to become the best version of themselves. And Another principle that we talk about is invest in their development. So really pouring into someone else. And what you were talking about, this idea of Coach K, of understanding sort of the psychology of each individual player, so he could lead them almost in a customized way. You've got 12 players. I lead this one this way. I lead arm around this one, little pat on the butt, yelling and screaming at that, because he knew who they were and what they needed first as people. That's human-centered leadership. And I would encourage anyone listening to this, understand what your people want. I think it's really critical to say a year from now, 5 years from now, what's important to you? Where do you want to be? And if I can invest in supporting that person, meeting them where they are, and supporting them at their place of highest need, that's somebody who's going to invest back. And you say, well, how do you know? I lived it. My best boss, John, poured into me. He gave me self-confidence. He helped me see the world a different way. I borrowed his belief when my own ran out. He literally stretched me in a way where I got to see more potential opportunity and a bigger life than I really ever imagined on my own. And I'll never forget that. And I can tell you this, if it was the end of a quarter and he needed a little bit extra from me, or another deal or two, or a weekend, part of why I worked so hard and invested so much, because I wanted him to be successful. Like, he did so much for me, cared about me so much. I was loyal to him. I stayed at that company for more than 15 years, not because of the company. I wasn't loyal to the company. I was loyal to John. That's human-centered leadership.
That is so good. You said when you ran out of your own belief, you could use his belief. I've never heard it said that way. And that is so good, because when someone else believes in you beyond what you can even see, and I use a lot of athletic analogies because I coached basketball for 30 years. And I've done corporate, and I worked in business and all that too. But the basketball piece, it was my job to stretch my players because they didn't know how good they could be. I did, though. I could see it. And they may not have known they were going to be a three-point shooter when they started. But by the time we were finished working with them, they were a different player. They had become something they couldn't even see. And that's what I heard when you said, when you ran out of your belief, man, you had a boss that you could rely on their belief in you and in themselves in you. That's crazy, man.
It changed my life. It changed the opportunities I had. It changed the way I showed up. And then when you start to believe in yourself that way, you go back to the sports analogy. You step into the arena of competition, whether it's the floor or the boardroom. When you're imbued with that kind of belief and it starts to catch, my belief was catching up to his, you step into the arena with absolute certainty. You want to talk about confidence? Like, I know we're winning this deal. I know we're winning this game. I'm not going to let us lose to them. No. And that mindset shift in an athlete, a three-point shooter, like, I come off the screen and I even have a second to get this off. It's in. Like, when you're shooting with that confidence and that certainty, and like, you have that freedom to play in that way, that's a catalyst for peak performance, man.
Yeah, that's a great formula. Well, this is a great place to take a quick break. And when we come back, I think I'm going to have you talk about having fun.
Wonderful.
Why having fun in the workplace is important. Because I think if it's not fun, I don't care what it is, I'm not going to be staying there very long. And sometimes we make things unfun that actually can be fun.
Correct.
When we come back, we're going to dig further into his book and also understand the importance of knowing that you are valued and that you're valuable, because that is very important to your success. We'll be right back on Paralysis to Purpose podcast.
We hope you're enjoying Paralysis to Purpose, the podcast. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Paralysis to Purpose for more updates. Also, check out David's website at davidcookspeaks.com to learn more about his mission and purchase his book, Getting Undressed, From Paralysis to Purpose.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Paralysis to Purpose, the podcast. I'm David Cooks, and we have a fantastic guest here today, Ryan Estis, and we have been discussing his book, his life, just stuff to help us all out. And it's been really, really good. His book is called Prepare for Impact, Driving Growth and Serving Others Through Principles of Human-Centered Leadership. We talk a lot about purpose on this podcast, and we talk about the journey from paralysis to purpose includes three things that I think are pretty important: perspective, perseverance, and partnerships. And we've been talking about some of that already, and we'll get to that toward the end. But one of the things that I believe about purpose is that purpose is only fulfilled when you're serving others. Otherwise, it's an activity, as I call it. You've already touched a little bit on the importance of serving others and putting other people first. To do that, can you talk about intentionality and why you have to be intentional about these things?
Sure. I think one of the best ways to talk about this idea of purpose and serving others is maybe to tell you about how I learned about that. I think like a lot of young people who grew up, and I grew up playing sports, by the way. My father was a basketball coach, and I was competitive and performance driven. And when I got out into the world, some of that, there was utility in some of those ways of being, because I, to your point, drive and compete and practice and work hard, and all of those things were imbued in me. I also, I didn't want to fail. I think a lot of my identity and was tied into my success. And so I very much had something to prove. And I went out on my journey. And I think for the first, I don't know, 20 years of my career life, it was probably about me. First, it was a salesperson. And then I think even in many ways as a manager or leader, it was about the performance of my team. And then when I transitioned out as a consultant, even as a speaker initially, was my content good? Did they like me? Did I get a standing ovation? A lot of ego in there. And then perspective often comes when you have a setback. I talked a little bit about the Great Recession and COVID, but in 2016, I had a personal setback, a health scare. I had a tumor in my arm. They thought it was cancer. And I had a few weeks between the initial diagnosis and the surgery I had to have. And my father, I had lost him with cancer. It ran in my family. There was a lot of fear around that word. And I remember I had a choice. I had a speech booked between the time I had received the diagnosis and then the surgery. And they didn't know what it was, but they were going to confirm it when I had the tumor removed. It was in my bicep. And I thought I was really upset and anxious, couldn't sleep, was overwhelmed. I was scared. And I remember I thought about canceling the speech. Like, I'm not myself in the middle. I'm dealing with this health crisis. Like, I don't know if I'm capable of getting up there and doing my job. And my business manager and one of my friends, partners, encouraged me to go. And I did. And I just remember in that moment, I thought, if I don't get to do this for a long time, and maybe this is a day, how do I want this to go? And all I thought about was, I want to leave, I want to impart something. It wasn't about me anymore, whether they liked me or not, or did I get a standing ovation, or was I funny? It was all about, what do I have to say that's going to help them? And that was the beginning of my transition from having something to prove to something to give. And I was fortunate. It was a benign tumor. I didn't have cancer. But what I did have was perspective. And when you show up as an act of service, truly with something to give, the resonance changes, the relationship changes, the experience changes. And over time, if you do that consistently enough, you change. And so we just, it's interesting. You mentioned this, we just launched a new website. And under the About section, you'll see my core values if you scroll down far enough. Yep. One of my core values is something to give, that our meaning, our fulfillment in life comes not from when we're doing things for ourselves, but when we're focused on others, when we're serving others. And that really is consistent, whether you're selling or leading people. It isn't about you. It's about having something to give, creating an impact for somebody else. And what's beautiful about it is if you do that enough, who gets rewarded the most? Where does your meaning and fulfillment come from? The impact you have on others.
There's a phrase in the book and I want you to talk about finishing together. You and your brother compete at everything.
Yeah, that's one of the things you get out of the book is we call it a healthy sibling rivalry. I don't know. Maybe people read the book and say those two aren't healthy at all. They're nuts, but we do. We're competitive.
You had a moment there where finishing something together,
Yeah,
instead of beating each other out, became important. What a moving moment. And
thank you.
dealt with the cancer scare and some other things that, like you said, change your perspective and change some of how you went about things. Why is finishing together sometime more important than the race that we're running?
Because that's what makes it worth it. The fulfillment you have on the other side of accomplishing meaningful results, the relationships we form on this journey. I think sometimes how we show up for each other, what we can endure together, it makes any type of success or crossing that finish line more worthwhile. And when you say like you set off on a journey, whether it's to break a sales record or to run a race or to accomplish some significant milestone, to know that you're not alone, and that someone has your back and cares about your well-being and your outcome, and you care about theirs, and you're in it together. By the way, even when it gets hard, and maybe especially when it gets hard, we talk about in the book with the health scare situation. And I think it's important to know that we're not traveling alone. That I go back to someone sees me, knows me, understands me, cares about me enough to show up for me when I need it the most. I think that's real important, especially now. One of the challenges in the post-pandemic world is loneliness has become a real crisis. The Surgeon General is talking about it. It's an epidemic. I think it's 1 out of 5 adult males reports not having a single friend that they trust enough to confide their deep feelings to. That's a hard way, and it's an isolating way to live. I'm not married. I don't have kids. I live alone. It became real important to me to develop those kinds of relationships. One of the big reflections out of the pandemic for me was the further journey I go on, I'm not going to travel alone. I'm going to do it in partnership, in community, in the context of meaningful relationships, because I think it's more rewarding that way. And I think you can go further when you travel together.
Yeah, man, you talked about that loneliness thing over the last 18 months, just craziness between infections and broken femurs, blood clots, and all kinds of
Mm.
and I was by myself. My wife is at work. You don't have kids. And that loneliness thing is a real thing.
It's a real thing.
And to have someone or someone's who can show up when you need them is so valuable. And it does make you evaluate the relationships that you have. And what are they built on? Do they need to be dismantled? Do you need to make a difficult decision as the leader of your life to eliminate and then restock? And those are not easy. Those are not easy things, but I didn't know about the 1 in 5. I'm one of the 1 in 5. Let me tell you right there. And it was just crazy because when things in life happen, you don't get much notice. You don't get to prepare.
No.
You don't get to let everybody know, hey, I think this is coming down the pipe. Will you be there? You don't get any of that. And the rest of life continues. And you sit there and you're like, man, what in the world is this? Which is just crazy.
Yeah, I mean, so I appreciate your vulnerability. I know how you feel because I've been there. When COVID happened, I was coming off a year where I did almost 90 live events. I couldn't even, I was living in hotels. I was all over the place, traveling, flying, and I was just so busy. And I didn't even really have time to think about. And then all of a sudden this thing happens and my business, my travel goes to zero. And I was just coming out of the end of a long-term relationship. And so here I am. It's the longest time, I think, probably in 20 some years, I hadn't been on a plane, and I really don't have a lot of work to do. And I'm sitting home and I'm alone. And I really had to sit in that and think, I may have some success outside looking in. Last year on Instagram, it looked pretty good. But I'll tell you what, right now in the dark, on a Wednesday night when everything is closed and there's nowhere for me to go, it doesn't feel very good. And I just decided in that moment that whatever the future held, it was going to look differently, and that I was going to make some real changes. And I have. And that's part of the genesis of Impact 11 and building a community and having 3 new business partners. And it's also part of the reinvestment in some relationships. And it's also, to your point, establishing some new ones and creating community. And even writing the book, one of our core principles of writing the book, we talk about it in the book, is we're going to have fun doing it. If we're going to do this, and yep, it's going to get hard, and we're going to tear ourselves up to write this thing and take weekends and late nights or whatever it is, this is going to be fun. And we made sure to make that project fun, and we've really celebrated the release and its success. And so there's been a lot of fun around that. And I think that's a good tenet for doing most things in life.
You need to enjoy and be intentional about having fun too. It's almost like we're intentional about being disciplined and all of those things that sound, I don't know what the word is for that, but having fun is something you need to be intentional about. How do you, in the work that you do, the consulting that you do, and the mentoring that you do, how do you get that across? How do you make that a reality for the people?
What happens with people is we have these ideas. You could call it like we have a purpose or a vision or preferences or things in our life that are meaningful or that we enjoy. What do you really enjoy? When are you the happiest? When do you light up like a Christmas tree? And oftentimes our responsibilities or our priorities, we have to do this. But sometimes self-care and well-being and coffee with a friend and a party to celebrate a milestone because we made progress, it's easy to skip those things. We'll get to that, and you put those things off. And as you put off these things that light you up and give you joy, what happens is your life becomes a series of tasks. And so I reorient people back to, why are you doing all this in the first place? What's it for? One of the principles we have at my company, Impact 11, our operating principles is dance like nobody's watching. And it's just a reminder that we're going to celebrate progress and celebrate each other. And we're going to work really hard and accomplish great things, but we're going to have fun along the way. And to me, that's part of the joy of the experiences. You enjoy the people you're creating with and building with. You celebrate progress or meaningful milestones in each other's lives and in the business. And it's so funny. We're talking here on Monday. We just had a huge party on Saturday for the release of the book. And we had music and food and cocktails and toast. And my brother flew in and some other people flew in, and we rented out a place. And it's we're going to celebrate this. You have to mark these moments, these milestones, because it imbues our life with meaning. And by the way, it's also a great reset or recharge to go after the next thing.
I try never to delay gratitude or joy.
Beautiful.
If I can have a good time, that's going to happen. And one of the things that I cannot wait to get back to doing, I love to fish. I haven't been able to since September 22nd of 2022, when the FEMA broke and had all these things happen. I haven't fished since August of 22. Do you know what's happening on April 18th?
You're going to fish it.
I have it on the calendar. I'm going to go do that. And just to those little bitty things that you miss, don't delay those things.
You said something that I think is pretty important too. So I'm a big philosophy of, if it's a priority, put it in the calendar. What gets scheduled gets done. And that's part of my system of accountability and discipline. If exercising 4 times a week is important, when are the 4 workouts? And this is my schedule, and this is my travel, and these are my commitments, and this is what I have to get done. Well, when are the 4 workouts happening? And if that's a priority, it goes in the calendar. And you know what? Maybe one of them is going to happen at 9 p.m. at night in Houston after I land in the hotel. Okay, but it's happening. And you have to do the same thing with celebration. You sit down, I sit down with my brother, and I say, okay, the book comes out this date. When are we going to do the celebration? What's good for you? Kind of, you look at the dates, and then you pick and you put it down and you start planning and you're committed to it, because otherwise, that weekend's not good for me. Yeah, well, the next one, you know what? Why don't we do it over the summer? Because that's better. And then summer comes, it's like, well, the book came out 6 months ago, so we probably should just skip it, and it doesn't get acknowledged. I'm not living my life like that anymore, man.
We only have a few moments left, and there's so many things in the book, but I want the people to read the book.
Me too.
I'm not giving it all away, but there's a couple of things. Let's see if I can find it really quick that I want you to talk about. Being authentic. We hear a lot these days about vulnerability, authenticity, and those types of things. And when I started speaking a few years ago and wrote my book, people were amazed that I was like so open. And I was like, why wouldn't I be? I just didn't know. I didn't know any better. I didn't know that people weren't honest and people didn't tell you the truth. Why is that so important in relationships and in leadership?
Because without that, you create an impediment to meaningful connection. And if there's so much inconsistency or somebody doesn't really know you, it's hard to trust you. And then it's hard to connect with you. And so you're talking about the gateway to human connection and meaningful relationships. And I think that's a big part of this, our success in the workplace. And it's the foundation of our success in life. So much of the quality of our life has to do with the quality of our relationships. To me, this starts on the inside. Leadership often is an inside job. If you don't know yourself, it's hard to trust yourself. And if you don't fully trust yourself, then it's hard to be transparent and authentic and vulnerable. And if you're not transparent, authentic, and vulnerable, you're not giving other people an opportunity to see you, know you. And so you feel disconnected. You don't feel fully seen, known, heard, understood. Also, if you don't love yourself, it's hard to be in that exchange, that sort of vulnerable, reciprocal exchange with somebody else. So I think it's real important for leaders and humans in general to get comfortable in our own skin and to be who we're capable of being and to be open, honest, transparent, and vulnerable, really in service of meaningful relationships and connection. I think that's certainly important on a team and in a business. And people talk about trust and transparency and authenticity, but what's it leading to? It leads to this really sincere, earnest, unconditional love and a commitment to one another. And I'm fortunate to have written a book with Chad, and he's a great case study for a lot of the concepts in the book. But I'm even more fortunate to have a brother who I know loves me unconditionally, and I hope he feels the same way.
What are you doing, and what does it lead to? That's a really good question.
Ultimately, I think that's one of our most important questions. And by the way, you could ask that question in the context of a business, a team. What are the behaviors or the actions, and what's that going to lead to? And if you're not happy with the outcome, then you might need to adjust the behaviors and the actions. Sometimes our success in life is a direct result of the questions we're willing to ask ourselves. If you're feeling frustrated or at any point in your life stuck or things aren't the way you want them to be, it's time to be transparent and honest with yourself. And what's this leading to? Am I going to arrive at a place in 6 months or 12 months that I can feel proud of? Here's another one. Who am I becoming? And if these behaviors and these habits, if more of this stacks up, if nothing changes a year from now, how am I going to feel about that? And I think those are pretty good motivators.
Yeah. Hey, how much time do you spend with your clients on talking about self-care?
I would tell you we spent a lot more time. We had a whole virtual series on wellness and well-being that we delivered for several of our clients that asked us to bring more of that content in. I think there's been a shift back to an increased emphasis on productivity and profitable growth. And those things are important for a whole bunch of reasons, by the way. I run a business. We are growing that business, and we're going to grow it profitably, and that's real. And there are a whole bunch of really good reasons as a business owner to be doing that. It serves our customers better. It serves our employees better. It creates opportunities for the future. We all can be excited about it. It's important. But I think on the journey, we also have to really consider the well-being of our people. And there's a lot of indication that we need a lot of indication and a lot of data that it would reveal we need to do a better job of doing that. It's also a leadership issue. 72% of leaders report being stressed, overwhelmed, and burned out at least some of the time. And what I tell managers and leaders, just had this conversation last week. I was at a leadership team and everybody was reporting just feeling exhausted and working through the weekends and not taking their vacation. And I said, you can't, it's an old adage, but it's true. You can't pour from an empty cup. And if you're in that place, it's really hard to be the best version of yourself for other people. So I think it's important. And I think there are a lot of people in the world that make that their topic or area of focus. I would say it's part of what I talk about because it's part of what it takes to be successful.
When you said you have to love yourself, that's the first thing I thought about. And some of that comes with self-care.
It's a priority for me. I coach other people, but I've never not had a coach for 15 years. I take time to reinvest in me. I can tell you those 4 workouts a week when they're on my calendar, that's as important as a call with the CEO. The people who help me calendar or can put things on my schedule know that time is sacred and we don't overschedule that with something else and figuring, oh, this is a client call. He'll figure that out. No, that's when that is. And that's my schedule. Like it's, so you have to prioritize yourself. And then look, I can sprint. There are stretches where I can go real hard. We just launched a whole new brand and a website, whole new series of videos. That was a sprint. We worked really hard through that period. Those nights, weekends, editing, writing a book's hard. Then you get to the finish line, you rejoice, you celebrate, you rejuvenate a little bit, maybe take some time for yourself, and then you replenish so you can come back and go at it again. And I think we need to give our people the weekends to do that.
We're just about out of time. And so I want to ask you, as I do every guest, when you hear each of these words, what comes to mind? And the first word is perspective.
Time for reflection.
Perseverance.
Belief in yourself.
And partnerships.
Well, for the Impact 11, it's my company, my partners, the community that we're building. That whole effort is all about co-creation, partnership, and better together. And so that just came top of mind.
Well, and we didn't get to talk about Impact 11. We probably have to come back.
We have to do round 2.
This has been fantastic. Any parting words that you would like to leave with our audience today?
You have something to give, that your contribution here matters. You came here for a reason. And when it gets hard, when you have a setback, when you get knocked off course, stay the course because we need you and you're here to make an impact. So I'll leave it there.
Ryan, your website is great. I did check it out.
Thank you.
It's really nice. I'm like, I got to get mine like that. If people want to follow you or get a hold of you, what is the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, RyanEstis.com is the new updated website. So check it out. And I'm pretty active on LinkedIn and Instagram too.
Again, thank you so much. This was a fantastic conversation.
I really enjoyed it. It was a pleasure.
So until next time on Paralysis to Purpose, the podcast, this is David Cooks reminding you that your ability to endure is always greater than your willingness to endure.
You can do anything you put your mind to.
Thanks for tuning in to Paralysis to Purpose. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Paralysis to Purpose on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. To purchase his book, visit davidcookspeaks.com. Be sure to tune in next time for more inspiring conversations with David Cooks.
We're living in a world of nonstop disruption, overwhelming change, constant distractions, right? And the truth is that we're all trying to get to a better future. We're all trying to create something better than is what we have in our current circumstances. Yes, we want to be grateful for what we have, but we're also trying to create something new and go after something that we want.
Next time on Paralysis to Purpose.
And we glorify the highlights we see on SportsCenter, the Instagram reels, the billion-dollar IPOs. But the truth is that it's the work that we do in the present moment that actually gives us the ability to bring some of those things to life. And with a mindfulness practice, we're training our minds to be more in the present moment.
Paralysis to purpose.